Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to welcome you to this informative session, which is not a part of any regular teaching, because as you know, teaching has been suspended as from yesterday, and should provide you practical information about behavior risks and possible arrangements in healthcare provision in a context of coronavirus infection, and hopefully prevent any panic. We are videotaping this presentation, so as all those colleagues of yours who could not or did not want to attend would get all the necessary information. First of all, I'd like to introduce the presenters. Professor Machala from the Department of Infectious Diseases of Bulovka Hospital and our faculty. You all probably know your general practitioner, Dr. Škrha, and the ladies from study division. This should not be any kind of church-like university, so whoever has a question, just raise your hands and raise the question. We only would like to reserve for us the possibility to put your questions on the parking lot if we are planning to react to them at the end of your presentation. So just, I'd like to sum yesterday's Dean's decree. Actually not Dean's decree, but it was the decision of Czech government and the Ministry of Health that has immediately suspended teaching in all types of educational organizations, including universities. This was the same surprise and shock for us as it has been for you. However, by Friday, the heads of individual departments should let us, and subsequently you know, how are they going to replace teaching in lectures and seminars. We prefer online presentations, so they have got all the tools to use to connect you to the presentation via these applications, or at least commented presentations put on Výuka or distribution of other materials. Clinical teaching, by the way, let's make a short count. How many first-year students do we have? Second? No one. Third, fourth, fifth, sixth. Right, so we have at least one student per year except for the second year. They are naughty, so I'll have to let them know by means of Facebook. Clinical teaching cannot be performed, and it will be replaced as soon as we will be able to start. If some of you are planning to go back home and the hospitals in your country will provide clinical teaching, you can present it to the heads of individual departments, and if they'll recognize that they will approve for that teaching that you have participated in your own country, you can use it. Other than that, we're going to try to fulfill the needs as much as possible so that all of you will be able to finish the academic year in time. We don't know yet how long will this arrangements take. It may be longer than we expect. The university is considering possible extension of the fall study period and registration, but those were our informations that will be provided to you when we approach them. Other arrangement is that the faculty is closing for students every day at 4 p.m. So those of you who have got used to study here can come, but it won't be open on weekdays after 4 p.m. and during weekends. Okay, and we will proceed to the practical arrangements after my colleagues have spoken, because a lot of your questions may be answered during their presentations. Do you have any questions at this moment? No. So I'd like to ask Professor Machala. I'll pass over the baton.
Thank you for introducing me. I think with some of you we already met in the past. I've been working at the Department of Infectious Diseases in Bulovka Hospital, that's why I am not in the white coat. I would like to provide you with brief information, basic information about this new disease. We must realize that we all learn the facts on March. It's quite new problem, and maybe some facts will change in the future with further development of this problem. The explanation of this abbreviation, COVID means coronavirus disease, and the 19 indicates that this disease emerged last year, in the previous year. I would like first briefly, shortly, make short repetition of the facts. The first reports about this new disease were published on the December 29 last year. There occurred some cases of severe pneumonias with unknown origin, and very quickly was recognized that the causative agent of this respiratory infection was a novel coronavirus. 3 weeks later was confirmed interhuman transmission of this new agent, and on the February the 12th, this new agent obtained the name SARS coronavirus 2 because another SARS coronavirus caused small pandemic 17 years ago. I will mention it later in my presentation. On the January the 13th was diagnosed first case out of China. First case in United States was 2 weeks later, and on the 24th of January was diagnosed first case in Europe. In Czech Republic was the first case diagnosed in Czech Republic, and I think the latest figure is 65 diagnosed cases in Czech Republic. Those figures change permanently with the time. Here we can see overview about the epidemiological situation last evening from previous day, and all numbers rose certainly, but the worst situation is still in the continental China. In the Europe has the worst situation Italy, with the highest number of confirmed cases. In terms of the etiology, coronaviruses are chronically known group of RNA viruses. Coronaviruses are enveloped, luckily, because this envelope makes them more sensitive to disinfectants. They are less resistant to the bleaches and other chemical or physical factors. They are RNA viruses. Here we can see electron microscopic picture. On the surface are so-called spikes, which resemble somehow solar corona. That's why the name coronaviruses. Those spikes play important role in attachment and penetration of the virus into the target cell, and maybe some antigens which are also located on those spikes will help us to develop vaccine. Couple words about the history of coronaviruses before the year 2003. Coronaviruses were known for decades as absolutely neglected pathogens of very low significance for the human medicine. Coronaviruses were always responsible for some diarrheas of calves and I think some respiratory infections of poultry, but in the human pathology they were thought to be responsible for very mild upper respiratory tract infections or mild diarrheas. In the textbook on infectious medicine, which were published before the year 2003, are coronaviruses usually mentioned only on few single lines. The situation dramatically changed in the year 2003 when new severe respiratory infection, which was then called severe acute respiratory syndrome, emerged, similarly like now in the China. And this infection spread for a relatively limited time, only approximately 9 months, with 8,000 cases and a relatively high fatality rate. Approximately 800 infected individuals died. We think that this infection jumped to humans from civets. Civets are animals which are in the China used also for eating, and probably the original reservoir of most up to now known coronaviruses are various species of bats. And we think that originally this SARS coronavirus jumped from bats to the civets. A couple of years later, thanks to very massive quarantine measures, we were successful in containing this epidemic, and after a few months then this infection completely disappeared, and after the June 2003 were no detected any cases of this infection. Completely disappeared. A few years later emerged another coronavirus infection, Middle East respiratory syndrome, which is probably less contagious than the previous SARS. Also, thanks to the massive quarantine measures, we contained this infection with approximately 2,500 infected individuals, but with significantly higher fatality rate, which reached more than 30%. This infection jumped to humans probably from camels. I didn't put here a picture of camel because everybody knows how camels look like. And again, the very first origin is again from bats. This new infection, COVID-19, probably originates similarly like the previous infections from bats, which from bats jumped the infection to the pangolins, and pangolins are also considered as a delicious food in China, and probably somewhere at the beginning of the December previous year, the infection jumped from the poor pangolins to some individuals in the Wuhan market. Wuhan is very important industrial center within central China, within 11 million people, and it was only question of time the further spreading of this infection. Unfortunately, probably Chinese authorities at the very beginning of this epidemic underestimated the situation, and that's why the infection started the fast spreading. Certainly, is this new coronavirus more contagious than those previous two? The major route of transmission is airborne. The virus is shed from the respiratory tract of infected individuals, and it can be transmitted also by close contact, like kissing, for instance, with infected individuals. The problem is that this relatively highly contagious pathogen has opened world with completely susceptible world population. Nobody in the world is immune, non-susceptible, and that's why the spreading is so fast. The transmissibility rate is expressed by this parameter R of, which indicates that one case infects probably something between 2 and 3 new cases. It's not very high transmissibility rate compared, for instance, with measles, because this parameter for measles is 18 cases, chickenpox, for instance, 4 to 5 cases, and normal seasonal flu varies between 1 and 2 new cases. But nevertheless, this transmissibility rate is enough high for quick spreading. How we can protect ourselves against those airborne infections? First of all, we should avoid visiting overcrowded places. It's easy to say, more difficult to do that, of course, but that's why were taken quarantine measures in Czech Republic, like closing theaters, cinemas, and even schools. Experts think that sufficient distance from the source of infection under normal conditions is something between 1 and 2 meters. Generally, the distance of your arm. Do not allow people who coughing people or sneezing people to approach you with a shorter distance. The virus survival is estimated, again, under normal conditions, up to 30 minutes. And the optimal protection is using the respirators, but even using those face masks can significantly reduce the risk of transmission. Unfortunately, there is big shortage of both items worldwide, and it's not easy to get those protective aids. The problem is also the surviving of the virus on inanimate surfaces. We think that as an enveloped virus, the time of survival of the virus is not very long, but in extreme situations, the virus can survive on the surfaces even for hours. And of particular danger, I think, is touching such bars in public transportation system. We can protect ourselves by avoiding unnecessary touching, and particularly avoiding of immediate touching with the same hand the face. I make surveys every day in the morning in the subway system, and it's surprisingly common that people touch first some handles or bars, and then immediately the same finger insert into the nose. Please reserve at least one hand for holding on the bar and the other hand for touching or inserting to your nose. Of course, it's wise to use gloves. If you have disposable gloves, then to throw them away. Very important is proper washing hands by using soap. We think that such the hand hygiene can reduce the risk of transmission by almost 50%. And in terms of public transportation, I would nowadays prefer transportation on the surface to using the subway, because in the subway is a special air conditioned regimen, and I think the density of the virus can be in the air within the vehicles of the subway higher than in the normal trams. But try to touch the surfaces in those vehicles as less as possible. Very important is hand disinfection, but unfortunately, similarly like with those face masks, nowadays it's practically impossible to buy those disinfectants. But I would like once again to point out that normal soap is very effective disinfection against those viruses. In the hospital where are admitted the patients with confirmed infection, they are placed into the rooms with negative air pressure. It means that the air is sucked by the special filter ventilation system, which cleans completely the air even from viral particles. And the doctors who are particularly exposed to the infection by examining the patients should wear protective aids like respirators, goggles or shields, and then disposable coats and gloves. In terms of the clinical symptomatology, the average incubation period is probably 5 days, with the longest possible incubation period up to 2 weeks, and the clinical course is in most cases mild or even asymptomatic. Approximately 15 cases develop more severe course characterized by pneumonia, which requires usually hospitalization. Approximately 4% of cases develop critical, very serious course, which requires usually hospitalization in intensive care units, and in some cases even artificial ventilation. And the fatality rate, the general fatality rate, it's estimated up to 2 to 3%, but with very significant differences in context of the age. The highest fatality rate is logically in the oldest seniors, particularly if they have also some serious comorbidities like cardiovascular, respiratory chronic diseases, etc. With the increase of the age, increases also significantly the fatality rate, and in your age groups, it's in fact the fatality rate equal to the fatality rate of normal seasonal flu. The fact that you could die from normal seasonal flu, which comes every year during the cold period, is the risk is the same like the death from COVID-19. Diagnosis of this infection is done by detection of the nucleic acid of the causative agent in nasopharyngeal swabs. It's possible also to detect the antibodies, but we don't know exactly how those antibodies should develop, and we need more observation for a longer time to be sure how the antibodies are produced. Very useful is also chest CT. Here we can see high resolution CT which shows consolidation and opacities here in those parts of the lungs on both sides. Therapy is up to now available practically only symptomatic, ranging from distribution of hot beverages with lemon and honey and antipyretics on the one hand for the mild cases, to intensive care, which is necessary even with artificial ventilation or extracorporeal oxygenation for the most severe cases. Fortunately, in the near future, we could have available causative antiviral therapy. Nowadays are performed some clinical trials on on some antiviral agents. Very promising is remdesivir. It's a nucleoside RNA synthesis inhibitor, which was, by the way, developed here in Prague. This molecule was synthesized here in Prague. Originally, this molecule was developed against Ebola. You maybe remember this epidemic of Ebola a couple years ago in Western Africa. But unfortunately, this epidemic was too short to verify the effectivity in this molecule, and similarly the previous epidemics of SARS and MERS were unfortunately too small and too short, and it was not possible to try effectively those molecules. There are also some possibilities of protease inhibitors. Very advanced studies are conducted by Professor Hilgenfeld from Göttingen in Germany. 2 months ago, this guy was probably the only European who tried to travel to Wuhan. All people being in Wuhan tried to escape back to their home countries, and Professor Hilgenfeld will probably be the only researcher who tried to travel into the center of the epidemics to offer them the possibility of therapy with his molecule. The most effective tool how to stop the spreading of the infection is using the vaccines. But you know, development of vaccines is relatively complicated procedure, and I am not very optimistic that we could have available vaccines within this year. Probably the first vaccines which will be really working and available for the broad practice will be available in the next year. And of course, if those studies will have positive results, then those antiviral agents will be reserved only for the most severe cases of this infection. A sip of optimism for the end of my presentation. We are privileged to be eyewitnesses of the very first pandemic which we can study really in the real time online. Nobody in the history had such unique opportunity. Thank you for your attention. Thank you.
I'd like to thank Professor Machala, and before we open the floor for discussion, I'd like to ask Dr. Skurha to provide you some practical information, as it's easy when Czech language students studying in the Czech curriculum send me an email or ask me what should I do. I tell them you have to contact your GP, but for all of you, he is your GP. So I'd like to ask him to provide you up-to-date information about what to do if you're not feeling well.
Thank you very much. Okay, so firstly, I would like to start with the fact that those recommendations are changing from day to day. Last week on Wednesday, I thought that I would be skiing this week in the northern Italy, and everything was changed, as you know. The recommendation can be different, for example, tomorrow. So what about the current recommendation? Everything depends on the fact if you have been traveling to any affected countries. It means Italy, China, South Korea, Iran, Germany, France, in the last 14 days. If not, if you have any troubles, any symptoms or so, you should consider it as a normal cold, as a normal flu, for example. And the other thing is, if you haven't been in a contact with someone from that country that was diagnosed as a positive person. Okay, so if you have no contact with anybody from the who was positive, and if you haven't traveling to the affected countries, you should consider those diseases as a normal cold, normal flu or so. If you have been in contact with someone, and or if you traveled to those countries, if you have some symptoms, then you should call on the hygienist or me, for example. If you are not able to contact them, and maybe I could send you an email with the important phone numbers. Important.
They already got it many times.
They got it. Oh, okay. So you have those numbers. So if you have any question, you can contact me directly, and we can. I can advise you what to do then, or I can negotiate it with the hygienist by myself, and then to transfer you the information. The importance is to stay at home and not to go to any hospital unless you have really serious troubles. It's important for not to spread the disease further. So that's this thing. And if you really have severe troubles, then call the number 112, and they will give you other information what to do next. Okay, and the ways how to do the diagnostics, or how to diagnose the COVID is by home attendance to you. So if you have a trouble, someone will come to you. Or if you have a really big problem, then you will be transferred by infectious ambulance to the hospital, to the infectious disease department. Okay, so that's the most important fact maybe for you. Okay, so.
Okay, thank you very much. The issue with contacting the public health office is such that the line is always engaged now. So they have already asked yesterday us if we could provide some medical students that would help them operate the helpline. So hopefully they'll be able to pick up the phone more frequently. Other than that, our non-stop phone line is always working. So if really things get very, very worse, don't hesitate to contact me or my colleagues who are rotating with me on this phone line, and we'll be able, hopefully, to arrange support for you or whoever needs it. So now let's open the floor to questions for general discussion, and I just ask those of you who'd like to ask a question to wait a bit till I run and give you this microphone, so that also your colleagues sitting somewhere at home by their computers will understand what you are asking for. Oh, so far.
Hello. My question is about the possibility of closing the borders, because this happened between Italy and Austria, and if it's in consideration or it's just something that...
Well, I'm afraid that you're not addressing this question to the correct addressee. That's a responsibility of individual governments. From what we have, from information from open sources, European Union is not considering closing borders between member states, but this is something that can happen from 1 hour to another. However, you may know that even if borders are closed, the citizens are allowed to go back, not to travel. So if you are a citizen from Italy and Italy would close its borders, they are going to receive citizens, but they won't let them leave. For how long? You have to ask a few levels above. No one knows. There was a question over there. Can you? I will just repeat it to the microphone.
So my question is, it might seem kind of dumb, but most people ask themselves, okay, so the fatality rate and death rate, everything is similar to the flu. Why is it then that the government made such a big thing out of it by closing schools, by closing, like canceling concerts, etc.?
Okay, I'll just repeat your question and then pass the microphone over to Professor Machala. It was a question about if we are comparing this to flu and saying that it's similar to flu, why is there such a lot of fuss about coronavirus with closing schools, etc.?
The fatality rate is low in your age group, you know. But look here, then, and if are infected 100,000 people, inclusive of those older, then we could very easily overburden the complete healthcare system, because we have limited capacity of intensive care units, limited capacity of ventilators. And do not think only about you. You are young. You probably will overcome it without problems, but except you can be infected, particularly endangered older people. Yeah? And my recommendation is to stay now here, not traveling to your home countries, because you could infect your grandparents. And your grandparents are also particularly endangered. You know?
I totally understand. I just don't know the numbers with flu and the death rate in those higher ages.
Yeah.
And no, I totally understand the point.
Yeah. But flu doesn't make so many people normally sick. Yeah?
Okay, and if Professor Machala is saying we don't have ventilators, that does not mean we in the Czech Republic. It means we worldwide. Everyone, including very rich countries, is struggling with availability of ventilators. So now it's your turn.
Do you know how long the schools will be closed?
How long the school will be closed? No, I don't. I don't know. It is estimated that it will be at least unless the end of April, probably longer. April, the fourth month, April. But it can change from as it was shut from one day to another. It can be open from one day to another, depending on the epidemiologic situation. No one knows now. I think the estimates were that the peak of the
summer.
somewhere in the summer, yeah, June-ish. We don't know. And you know, what was right yesterday is not true anymore, because the situation is changing in all the member states. There is a very strong pressure inside the European Union that the strictest measures should be applied to all the member states. So there is a question somewhere, yeah?
Practical lesson for 6 years, you basically need to go and find it somewhere else, because you won't be allowed to go in this hospital.
Practical lessons for the 6th year. If you do have the possibility to arrange them outside the hospital, and that hospital will accept you, which the numbers are getting lower and lower. I'm getting new emails every day. We will then, especially for the 6th year, have to think about, or the departmental heads will have to think about some replacements. After this regulation will finish, then they can teach 12 hours per day, they can use the weekends, but as it is now, it is not possible to teach, especially, and it's pressure from both sides. One is from the university, or from the Ministry of Education, and the other is from the Ministry of Health and from the hospital management, because due to the fact that the incubation period, asymptomatic incubation period, is so long, and due to the fact that most of the patients most of the inpatients are older people, are senior people, then the hospital CEOs want to want to have the risk as little as possible. It is a very exceptional situation for all of us.
And to confirm, we're going to have 2 weeks of seminars next week,
Mm.
and it says we're going to be in the hospital, in the basement. It will be a event, or
No. By the and as I said before, yesterday I wrote to the departmental heads to send me an information by Friday how they want to replace teaching. And as we are talking, I'm getting emails, so you'll sure get them. You can contact them directly as well. Most of them are going to be using commented presentations. Some of them are thinking about these online lectures. So I hope, and I'm sure, it will be sorted out. And especially sixth-year students are our priority logistically, because we do want them to finish their studies in time. Yeah, Paolo?
I have a question from somebody who's watching at home, and it's Maximilian, and he says, will required practices / seminars that are now cancelled be substituted in advance to the exams, or will there be the possibility of taking the exams without finishing the practices?
There will not be a possibility of taking exams without being credited for the conditions, but the conditions may be modified, and they already have been by some of the teachers. Instead of presence at school, they can give you some work to do, some thesis to write, some study to perform. They can test you via Skype. So no, we are not going to alleviate the condition of having a credit before the test, but we are going to modify the content of teaching as much as possible. It's not an issue in seminars and lectures, it is an issue in clinical teaching. Yeah? That is a possibility, and the Chancellor of the University announced yesterday that they will decide on this by the end of April, depending on the actual situation. Yeah, it's not like extending the year, but there is a possibility of lightening the conditions to register into the following year and letting you undergo the test, let's say, until the end of November, for instance. Introducing something which used to be called conditional registration.
There's another question from Paul, if I can ask.
Yeah? But use the mic.
Sure. It says, I think it's Tanay Patel, asks, can varying pH levels of a few household substances, such as sodium bicarbonate, help kill the virus or solve the infection? If varying the pH of household substances, like for example, using sodium bicarbonate, can help kill the virus.
Of course, yes. As I mentioned, those enveloped viruses are really very sensitive to all possible chemical and physical factors, so it's not difficult to kill them on the surfaces. Even differences in pH, for instance, etc. Yeah. You're welcome.
in case we won't be able to take internal medicine practices, we will be able to take the state, or it's not going to be possible?
You are starting your block next week. We will cross that bridge when we approach it, or not we, but the department. I think they cannot waive all the practical training, but they have several ways how to rearrange it, especially for the 6-year students, and especially for 6-year students in the English curriculum, because your number is pretty low. It's not a lot of you, so they can use these out of normal hours. And I'm sure, again, it's the same answer. We'll know more by Friday. Because for them it was also a new information. I can't just push them to decide immediately. Yeah. No, they will pass it over to you.
So for in case there's like an arrangement in seminars or practices, maybe in April, end of April or May, I guess there's gonna be like more classes every day. So for example, in case I'm planning to do a trip, is there a chance that, for example, some of the practices I can lose them instead of like losing a flight?
I'm afraid that if theoretically this limit will come to an end by the end of April, priority for the university, for your teachers, and probably for all of you, will be to replace the missing classes, not really missing flights.
So then the schedule is going to be
that's one of the possibilities to sort it, but I cannot say yet, because it can be something that will last until May, and we'll have to rearrange everything over the summer or at time in the fall and so on. Yeah. Speak up.
My question is about if it would be possible to do the test, like the nasopharyngeal.
COVID test, like, because you want to.
Because then, because we are young, maybe we don't know that we are infected, and maybe we just go on and
Okay, nowadays there is no possibility to test yourself if you don't have any troubles. If so, you can do that via the hygienist or via some epidemiologist who could say, yes, just this person should have this test. Okay, so.
There's a regulation on the kits.
Because the number, yes.
Is there a question over there? No? Here? Okay.
My question was, in case this the study year gets extended over the summer, what happens to the, for example, first year summer ICM practices?
Again, we will cross that bridge when we approach it. However, I can imagine a situation when we will decide that if this would be the only problem to solve, I would be more than happy, because here I can say, okay, let's add one unfulfilled study obligation into the second year. That's a piece of cake, ICM electives over the summer, or you can add it to the second one. That's easy. Actually, first and second year's teaching is pretty easy. The more clinical teaching there is, the harder it is, because a lot of the teaching, even practices and participation in labs, can be replaced, but interaction with patients cannot. So this is what we are going to focus on. So a short one, don't worry. Can you just shout at me and we will... Yeah, you. Yeah, you.
I have a question. Basically, it's from a fifth-year student. She's asking basically if the infectology exam next week is cancelled, and generally, like the exams for this year.
No. Well, we didn't cancel anything.
All the exams are in place as for now. All the exams are in place as for now. Unfortunately, there have been some very active representatives of some universities that have been pushing on the Ministry of Education to stop the exams as well. However, the position of the medical schools are that exams are not teaching, and especially exams that don't take place in the faculty building there's no problem with those. If they would cancel the exams and if they would require us not to undertake any teaching and exams inside the building, we are prepared to shift them to the university lecture rooms, but not in clinical subjects. That's fine. Let her study on. Yeah. Going back home?
Yes.
We would not, naturally that's your decision. You are grown-ups, you can decide where to go. You should be aware that you're taking over some risks because your country can close the border. Czech Republic may impose quarantine on those arriving from abroad. You never know. And also you may miss some opportunities to participate in some group teaching here. That's your decision to go. I don't know which country are you from. UK. Yeah, I don't know if in tomorrow there won't be some stricter measures imposed. In general, we recommend to all our students here or abroad, if they are participating in Erasmus, stay where you are and wait what happens, because the situation may change very shortly. But naturally, if you go home, you go home.
Do people develop immunity?
Once more, I'll repeat it here. I couldn't.
Do people develop immunity after they have been infected?
Oh, if there is post-infectious immunity.
Hopefully, we don't know. But I think that after mild cases, it's not necessary that those infected people will develop stable, strong immunity. But I'm pretty sure that after severe forms, those patients will develop immunity. But I am also very curious about the future.
My mom, as a non-medical professional, she's very worried about me being here. And she was told by the fire department at home that we should stock up in medication and stuff like this. And I'm wondering,
That you should what?
stock up in terms of food and medication and so and so. And I'm wondering, are we there yet? Is this something we should try to do soon?
Nevím, co k tomu říct. Já jsem rozuměl, ale nevím, co. Some pasta, maybe.
No, there's in the general the recommendations that are given to the general public here is there's no reason for that. There's the country will not be running out of food.
If you need some chronic medication, for instance, it could be reasonable. Yeah, but in terms of food or something like this, I think it's.
Yeah. And you have these delivery services. We're not there yet.
Maybe I would have one question, or I would like to ask you if you would like to send me an email, for example, for your health troubles or so. If you could write as much information in the mail as possible when the trouble started and so on, so that I could directly solve it with someone, for example, or so.
Will your office be open on Thursdays as normal?
This Thursday not, but from the next week, yes. This one is closed due to my holiday. So.
Probably in northern Any other questions, comments? Yeah.
So basically, like, just to make things clear, like for lectures and seminars that are non-clinical, that are basically like in theory, they will be happening online via like lectures recorded or just like lectures uploaded on Yuka and then for us to read by our
I have the feeling that I already commented on this at least 5 times. So who'd like to answer this question? No one? You want to answer this question? No. I wanted just to report that by Friday we will let you know which unit, which subject, which topic will be taught in which way. Some of them are going to use streaming, some of them are going to use videotaping, some of them are going to use commented presentations. It depends subject by subject. Some of them will just send you papers to study, whatever, right? We are not getting to a point where everyone will be doing it the same, because there's a difference if it's a lecture on, I don't know what, statistics, and it's a lecture on internal or surgical propedeutics. Other questions? Other questions? No? Is there any? Are you from the second year? Yeah. Did you have the wrong time or? No, but you are the only representatives of the second year here, so now we'll start all over again because you had some. Okay, right. So we are going to post the videotape on probably on faculty website and let you know. Also, you are streaming it, so please distribute all the information you got here to your friends, because otherwise I'm sure that this is a new risk. It's a big health risk, but panic, inconsistency, and sort of stressing people is also a very, very high risk. Very high risk, and especially in a situation where those that are most fragile are seniors, it can get to a level of very, very severe panic that doesn't help anything and anybody. So please, it's not easy, it's hard, you had your plans, you may have had your plans for the summer or for the year, but that's it. Things like this happen, and it can happen in your private life as well as in your professional. So apart from observing the coronavirus epidemic online, you can also use this as an exceptional issue, as an experience that may not, hopefully, will not be repeated in the future. I'd like to thank our today's presenters, Professor Machala, Dr. Skrha, Radek for videotaping, Paolo for whatever he's doing with his phone, ladies from the study division who are at your assistance. And I'd like to thank all of you for coming, for keeping calm but cautious, and for helping us inform your colleagues. Good luck.